No, unfortunately. Alright, who can tell me what they got for the measure of angle 6? And when I say why, you're using a theorem or a postulate. So you can either write out corresponding angles postulate or the reasons like they were listed on your homework. If lines parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. You cannot just write CA or AEA or AIA. You have to either write the name of the theorem or postulate, which you'll have to remember if it's a postulate or a theorem, or just write out what that postulate says, which I suggest doing because then you don't have to memorize how to write the name of it. But it's up to you. You cannot just write the type of angles they are, though. You have to use the actual theorem or postulate. So what would the measure of angle 6 be, and why? Maddie? Good. Reason? Good. If lines are parallel, corresponding angles are congruent. Again, if you don't want to write that out, you can write the corresponding angles postulate. Alright, now when we get to the measure of angle 7, there are two different justifications you could possibly have. What would the measure of angle 7 be and why? Stephen? Yep, and why do you think? Good, so he used the fact that we knew this one was 65. These two are vertical angles. So you can either write vertical angles theorem, or you can write vertical angles are congruent, which is what the theorem says. Okay, which usually I write out what the theorem says, but you're welcome to do it either way. And then let me go ahead and put that number in my picture. What's the other reason you could have picked instead of that, Brett?
Alternate exterior angles possible.
Good. Alternate exterior angles, it's a theorem though. Or you could say if lines parallel, alternate exterior angles congruent, AEA congruent. Alright, last one, the measure of angle 4. What was the measure of angle 4 and why? What's the measure of angle 4? No one knows. Marquise. 115 is correct. Do you know why?
Alternate interior angle?
With which angle would be alternate interior?
With angle 5.
Yeah, so if you found 5 first, even though they didn't ask you, you could use alternate interior angles. Based on the angles that I have pictured here though, probably would have used these two, which are same side interior, which means they're supplementary. So that was my 180 minus 65. Or some students will notice these form a linear pair, which is like your angle addition postulate would have to add to 180, so 180 minus 65. On the homework, you have the option of doing angle addition postulate if you did it that way. For this one though, I would probably say if lines parallel, same side interior angles are supplementary. Okay, now this is setting us up for proofs. Like that's why we're justifying everything, because eventually you're going to be asked to prove with like a whole bunch of transversals and lines that two angles are congruent, and you'll have to justify with reasons. So that's why we're doing this as we go. All right, let's take a look at our homework really quickly. I'll write through it. For number 1, we should have corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles. Number 2, we should have same side interior angles, corresponding angles, and same side exterior. Coming down, this one had 3 different lines, so you had to kind of look between them. We should have corresponding angles, same side interior, alternate interior angles, and same side interior angles. Which ones from the top section would you like me to go over or explain more from that set? Marquise?
On number 3, angles 5 and 2.
The last one?
Yeah.
5 and 2. Alright, so 5, trace it, 2, trace it. So if you notice, the transversal is the line going through. The two lines in question are these two. So you're kind of like ignoring this one, like pretending like it's not there. Okay? So between, now I look at 5 and 2, they're on the same side of the transversal, and they're both inside of my two lines. So again, if you were looking at that one, you might think they're exterior, but you kind of had to ignore the middle line since it wasn't touching those. Same side interior. Good question. Other ones? Okay, then we had our finding the measures. The measure of angle 1 should have been 75. I used corresponding angles to find that. This angle is corresponding to this one. They have to be congruent. And then angle 2 had to be 105, noticing that these form a linear pair, or using same side interior angles, which were supplementary. Number 5, we should have 120 and 60. Now be careful with this one. The parallel lines this time are going vertically. You might want to turn your paper so that they're going horizontally. It might make it easier for you. Angle 1 and 120 were corresponding. They're in the same location, so this one was 120 also. And then I used, you could use a linear pair here to get 60, or the fact that these two angles are same side interior, which are supplementary. Number 6, we should get 170. Now, this one you have to be careful. The only lines that are marked as being parallel are the top and bottom ones. So when you're finding angle 1, this would be your transversal. So when you look at these, this angle and this angle, those are both inside, and they're on the same side of the transversal. So these are same side interior angles, which we know are supplementary. So the two of these angles have to add up to be 180. 180 minus 80 gets me 100. Now for angle 2 over here, this is now my transversal. So it's a different transversal, same set of lines. Tracing my angles, those are alternating, and they're both inside, so they're alternate interior angles, which are congruent if the lines are parallel. 70. Now some students will say to me, Mrs. Bennett, what about these lines? Shouldn't these be supplementary? Well, no, because we don't see that they're parallel. Okay, since there's not parallel markings, they're not parallel, and we can't use any of the theorems or postulates that we learned. You could still classify them as same side interior, but you just can't say they're supplementary. If that makes sense. And then the last one was our algebra one, which these two angles, when I trace them, are corresponding. They're in the same relative location, top right, top right. Corresponding angles are congruent, therefore we set them equal, and we solved to get P was 32. On the back, a lot of you struggle because you didn't actually read the directions at the top. Find each of the following angle measures in order using the angle directly above it. So you were supposed to find the measure of angle 2 based on what the measure of angle 1 was. So let's just first check your angles. Don't even check the reasons yet. We should have 120, 60, 120, 120, 120, and 60. Okay, if you got the angles right, that's the important part right now. The reasons are going to follow, but if you didn't follow the directions, your reasons might be different, and they might still be right, just not following the directions. When you found the reason for angle 2, you should have got vertical angles for the first one. That's the only answer that you possibly could get. Okay. But for the measure of angle 2, you were supposed to use the angle directly above it to get it. So angle 1 was 120. So these two angles together are same side interior. If they're same side interior, we know they're supplementary. The lines were L and M, and the transversal was Q. Then to find the measure of angle 3, you're supposed to use the measure of angle 2 to find that. So 3 was over here, and I'm supposed to use angle 2, which is right next to it. Okay, those are not a special type of angle in terms of parallel lines. They're just a linear pair, a straight line, straight angle. So these together had to be 180, so that's why I have the angle addition postulate. Now, had you have used angle 1, these are corresponding angles, so that's why I put that option also. If lines parallel, corresponding angles are congruent. Either one of those would work. But if you followed the directions, you should have angle addition postulate. These two angles have to add to 180. Then to find the measure of angle 4, which is over here, you're supposed to use the angle that you just found. So these two angles are corresponding. They're in the same relative location. If lines parallel, CA congruent. Measure angle 5, which was up here. Again, relating 5 to this angle, those are alternating and they're exterior angles. So if lines parallel, AEA congruent. Also could have alternating exterior angles theorem. And then the last one was angle 6 that you're supposed to use finding the previous answer. This would be our angle addition postulate. If the reasons you don't have down pat yet today, hopefully today that's going to help because we're doing more practice. As long as you got the angles right, you should be good. You also can use your eye to judge, right? If it was acute or obtuse looking. Like this one is definitely obtuse. It can't be less than 90. So you can use that as a bit of a judge in these problems. All right. Our warm-up at the top asks us just to identify which angle forms a pair of same-side interior angles with angle 1. So which angle would form a pair of same-side interior angles? This is in your packet from Friday. With angle 1. So give me another angle that when I pair it with 1 will get me a pair of same-side interior angles. And if you need to, use your highlighters to identify your two lines. I actually would suggest you don't highlight the transversal. Marquise?
Angle 8.
Good. Angle 8 would get me a pair of same-side interior angles. Which angle would form a pair of corresponding angles with angle 1? Which one is corresponding to 1? Jeremiah? Angle 5. Remember, corresponding angles are in the same relative location. So again, top right corner, top right corner. All right. Today we're going to see some that have multiple pairs of parallel lines. Again, we are going to justify. My suggestion to you again is to use highlighters or colored pencils, but I would label the pictures if we need to. We will trace our parallel lines with a highlighter, and some of you may want to turn your paper so that the trace lines are going horizontally. That way it's easier for you to visualize. You don't have to though. Trace the corner of the angle with our pencil like we've been doing, and then we will follow to find the angle in question. Okay. Now this first picture has actually two pairs of parallel lines, so you might want to use different colors if you have them. If not, maybe just highlight one of the pairs at a time. But you can see that A and B are parallel because they have the little arrow on them. And then you can also see that C and D are parallel. They have an arrow on them as well. Kind of missed. All right, now the first question they ask me is angle 1. The only number I'm given is the 50 degrees, so you have to start with the number they give you. Now, some of you will like to just fill in the whole picture, like use vertical angles and copy the 50 there, create a linear pair. You can fill in this whole picture with numbers if you wanted to. Others of you will go as the questions ask you, so you don't have to find anything you don't want to. How would this angle be related to angle 1? What type are they? Joseph? These are corresponding angles, and we know corresponding angles have to be congruent when the lines are parallel. So if this one's 50, this is also 50. And you're either going to put if lines parallel, corresponding angles congruent, or you're going to put the corresponding angles postulate. Now when we get into section 3.2, we're going to be talking about the converse. Who remembers what the converse does? Flips the hypothesis and the conclusion. So in section 3.2, we'll be saying if corresponding angles are congruent, then lines are parallel. That's why we learned all that sentence stuff earlier in chapter 2. If you do it this way, you'll end up having to write like the converse of the corresponding angles postulate. Just as a heads up. All right. Angle 2. Let's look at angle 2. How big would angle 2 up be? Joseph? 130. 130. How do we know that? Joseph?
Alternate interior angles. Oh wait, no.
Mm-mm. Look at these two angles. They're not alternating. They're same side. And they're both, now this is where it gets confusing. This would be my transversal, right? Because this is the line they both touch. So these are the two lines in question. Those are interior. So if they're same side interior, we know they're supplementary. So since our lines are parallel, our same side interior angles are going to be supplementary. And as soon as you get an angle measurement, write it in your picture because it might help you find the next one. Next one has to be for angle 3. Two possible justifications for this one. You can either look at how angle 3 and angle 50, angle 1 are related, or you can look at how angle 3 and this 130 are related. Doesn't matter which one. What do we think? Maddie? 130? What reason do you think? Yes. These two angles right here are corresponding. This is in the bottom left-hand corner. Slide down your transversal. This is in the bottom left-hand corner. So those would be corresponding angles. Then you also could say corresponding angles postulate. The other option is to use, these are actually same side interior. Now some students will say, but they're outside. They're actually inside of my blue lines. These would actually be same side interior. So that's another possible option for a reason. All right, angle 4. What would angle 4 be? Angle 4. Joseph?
130.
Reason?
Vertical angles.
Good. Vertical angles. Either write out vertical angles theorem or write out what the vertical angles theorem says, which is vertical angles are congruent. Whichever you prefer. And lastly, 5. Measure of angle 5. Luke?
50.
50? What type of angle did you use there?
I used,
There's multiple answers here.
I used angle 1.
Angle 1, so you used the vertical angles?
Yeah.
Yep. You also could have used alternate interior with this one. These are alternate interior angles. So if you wanted, you could say if lines parallel, alternate interior angles congruent. Okay, so sometimes there's more than one justification. Now, looking at the next problem that we have below, something is different than this picture. We don't have two pairs of parallel lines. We only have one pair. And you'll see that it is given to you up here. P is parallel to Q. Do not highlight L and M. L is not parallel to M. Therefore, it can't be used to find corresponding alternate interior, all that kind of stuff. So basically, we just have two transversals. This is like transversal 1, and this is transversal 2. Again, it may benefit you to turn your paper so that the two parallel lines are going horizontally. Then they give us some information. Let's put it in the picture. Measure of angle 4 is 110. And the measure of angle 14 is 48. All right, so then let's go to our questions. Find the measure of angle 11, 10, and 6. Justify your answer. So, measure of angle 11. Marquise?
48 degrees.
Incorrect. A lot of you will look at these and say, these are alternating interior angles, right? They are. But these lines are not parallel. So since these lines are not parallel, you can't actually use those to say they're congruent. And that's why I put this problem on there, because, Stephen? It will be 70. Okay? Because this is my transversal, I have to travel along the transversal till I find another angle that I can use. These two angles are going to be same side interior because they're inside my blue lines. So they do have to be supplementary. Oops, 70. And we would say either the same side interior angles theorem, or if lines parallel, same side interior angles are supplementary. That's exactly why I put that on there, because most of you will tell me it's 48, and it's to kind of make that point that it's not. All right, how about angle 10? Angle 10. Brett?
Vertical, or it's 70 degrees.
Yep. 70 degrees because of vertical angles. And how about the measure of angle 6? I'm going to trace that with my corner. You're going to be careful. Joseph? 48. So again, I'm now using this transversal. So whenever I travel along this transversal, I find 48. These are corresponding angles. Now, again, these, some of you will say, shouldn't these be supplementary because they're same side interior? No, because L is not parallel to M. We only have one pair of parallel lines. Okay, so again, if lines parallel, C8. So again, I would make sure that you're highlighting only the parallel lines so that you can identify what's going on. All right, we're going to skip over the next one. If we have time, we'll come back to it, just to make sure we get through some of the harder questions. Now, I do introduce the triangle sum theorem, even though it's really not in this section, but it'll help you to find a lot of the measurements in the next picture. The triangle sum theorem tells you that the sum of the measures of the angles in a triangle, no matter what type of triangle it is, will always sum to 180 degrees. So in this picture, we would say that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle C is equal to 180. So like if you know two angles, you can find the third one by subtracting the sum. That's why this will be useful. So if you were to know that this were 50 and this were 30, that gets me 80. I have to have 180 degrees in the total thing, which would tell me this has to be 100. Okay, so this is useful when you know two of the three angles. And if you look at the pictures below, you'll see we have some triangles that are showing up, so that's why I introduced this theorem now. Although a lot of you probably already knew this from the middle school PSSA prep. But. All right, number 8. In the following diagram, P is parallel to Q and L is parallel to M. So we do have two pairs of parallel, which does make this a little bit easier than the last one. So these are parallel and these are parallel. Measure of angle 1 is 22. Put that in. Measure of angle 6 is 44. And the measure of angle 4 is 60. Find the measure of angle 3, 8, and 7. So in this picture, you're going to notice that there are a lot of alternate interior angles, a lot of pairs of them. You might just want to go ahead and copy and paste the, so we know alternate interior angles have to be congruent. So for example, 22 is here. Follow along the transversal. Angle 8 has to be 22. So everyone see how 1 and 8 are alternating and they're inside of my pink lines? So that actually answers my question here. Measure of angle 8 is 22 degrees. Why? If lines parallel, alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, if I come down here to the 44, again, travel along the transversal till I get up here. These, angle 6 and angle 3, are alternating and interior. They have to be congruent. So measure of angle 3 has to be 44 degrees. Same reason. then they say, what pair of parallel lines does angle 7 lie on? So first of all, for angle 7, let's trace it. The parallel line that it lies on would be this purple one, blue one at the bottom, because that's the one that it lies on. It does not lie on the pink line. Now the vertex touches the pink line, but it doesn't. So this would be L and M. Because it says which pair. So we have to find the measure of angle 7. How are we going to do that? We didn't use the 60 yet, right? Where could I copy and paste the 60? What other angle has to be 60 degrees? Brett? 5. Right? And at that point, or even at this point, doesn't matter, I would be able to find out this middle angle using triangle sum. Might help me. You also can use same side interior angles. I don't know if anyone noticed that yet, but you have to add them together. So if I use triangle sum, I'm going to take 180 is the total degrees it's going to have to add up in this triangle. I need to subtract 60 and subtract 22. So what am I going to get for that angle? How big would this angle be? Joseph? Close. Are these? 98. All right, now, and there's more than one way to do this, but this is usually the preferred method. Do we see the straight angle? How many degrees are in a straight angle or a linear pair? Right? 180. So we just need to subtract 180 minus 98. 82. Now, we have another triangle down here that we know 2 of the angles, we can find the third one. So we'll do triangle sum again. 180 is the total number of degrees that have to be in here, so I subtract the 2 angles, and that will get me my answer, which should be 54. And the reason here would be the triangle sum theorem. Now, there is another way to do this, and once everyone's done writing, I will show it. And that is actually to look at these angles. Okay, this whole angle and this whole angle would have to be same side interior angles, which means they're supplementary. Now you would have to add this together and add this together, but they would be supplementary, so if you checked it, it would work. Triangle sum is going to be your easier way. Okay. Let's take a look at another one. This one's going to be harder because we only have one pair of parallel lines. We can't jump across all of them, so only P is parallel to Q. Do not highlight M and L. You can tell that if we were to continue them, they would intersect somewhere. Okay. Then they also give us some information. Let's throw it in. The measure of angle 6 is 40. The measure of angle 4 is 10. This is not drawn to scale, you can tell. The measure of angle 1 is 20. The measure of angle 2 is 40. See if you can look through the questions. See if we can find any of the measures. Hello? All right, so who thinks they know what the measure of angle 3 would have to be? Follow up the transversal to the other parallel line. See if you see a type of angle that you know along line Q. Follow along the transversal. We see 40. What type of angles are these? 3 and 6. What type are these? Are they alternating or are they same side? Marquise? They're alternating. They're inside of my pink lines, so these are alternate interior angles, which have to be congruent. So 3 has to be 40. Okay, angle 8, trace the corner. Okay, it's on parallel line Q. This is our transversal, so travel down the transversal until you find another angle that touches the other parallel line. And we see 20. These are also alternating interior lines, angles, excuse me. So that has to be 20. Now, just to show you another way to solve, in case you didn't like the triangle sum, you can use same side interior angles. This whole angle and this whole angle are same side interior angles. We know same side interior angles have to be supplementary. Okay, which means this whole angle, which is 50 degrees, plus this whole angle, which is 20 plus something, let's call this x, has to equal 180. So if you want to use same side interior, you just have to combine the two small angles to make that big angle. And then we would just basically solve for x. So we could get 110. And this would be if lines parallel, same side interior are supplementary. Now you also could have done triangle sum like I did in the last question. So if you did triangle sum, we could do triangle sum here. 180 minus 40 minus 20 will get me 120. Then I can use a linear pair. 180 minus 120 will get me 60. And then I can use triangle sum again to get that that one has to be 110. Lots of different ways to solve these. Some students call them puzzle problems in the past because one answer leads you to your next answer and so on and so forth. This one would have been a no. Does angle 7 lie on a pair of parallel lines? It does not. Angle 7 and 8 together do. And which angle can we combine it with? We added it with angle 8. Okay. All right. Let's make sure we get through the next one and then we should be fine for the homework. Find the value of x and y. So first of all, notice the markings. We can see that these are marked as being parallel. So let's go ahead and highlight them. And you also might want to, you're allowed to extend it if it helps you to see it. Sometimes when they close off these shapes, students have trouble visualizing. So if you want, you can extend these. And you could even extend this and extend that. Clearance minus x, y, and they're just going to be answers. Anyone have a guess as to what angle x would be? Steven? 70. This angle, let's use a different color here, Mrs. Bennett, and this angle are corresponding. Now again, you may want to turn the paper so that the parallel lines are going horizontally so that you can see that this will be in the top corner, top right, top right. We know corresponding angles are congruent, so this has to be 70. So x is 70. What would y have to be? There's 2 ways to find this. Brett?
60.
Yes. How'd you figure it out?
I knew that the top, I used,
Alternate interior angles?
Yeah.
So use alternate interiors to copy 50 up here, and then you did triangle sum? Perfect. Another way you can do it, too, if you didn't notice that, is you can notice that all three of these angles together form a linear triple. Three angles that add to 180. So 180 minus 70 minus 50 would be minus 120, which is 60. Or you could do triangle sum as well. Okay. Let me get your homework out to you.